This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
Let's talk a little bit about the rest of this war, if you will, between WCW and the WWF, because that's certainly what this is, where guys are trying to play both sides against the middle and keep their value high.
Yep.
But guess what? It's not just the guys, it's the arenas. Meltzer would say the arena in St. Louis is booked for June 14th, but the arena turned WCW down and trying to get a bash date booked. Arena gave him a date despite Vince McMahon threatening to pull out of the building and out of town if they were to rent to WCW. Arena management is not trying to lose Titan, which is why they turned down the bash date. So we're looking for a spot to hold the Great American Bash, where we know famously Ric Flair will not be there, and it's going to be one of the worst pay-per-views of all time, Great American Bash 91. But what I want to talk about is not the bash in particular, but Vince McMahon doing power plays with arenas. Several years prior to this, even in the Crockett era, he was doing this with pay-per-view providers. Now he's taking it to the individual towns. What do you remember about this era where Vince started to do this?
That was a giant pain in the ass. A lot of people in WCW's office overreacted, as if, oh, goddamn, the business can't go on if we can't run St. Louis. Come on, let's go. Let's be serious here.
Yeah.
It was Vince being a very aggressive and relentless businessman, trying to, quote unquote, protect his side, his piece of the business. And it was nothing that anybody else wouldn't have done if they had the stroke. Watts would have done it. Eddie Graham would have done it. Vern would have done it. All the power brokers would have done the same thing if they had the stroke. And McMahon had the stroke to make things slow down in the sludge for WCW. So instead of, it's as if, I said to somebody, I remember having a talk. I said, I love St. Louis.
Sure.
I love the barbecue. I love the feel of the town. It's just, Sam Muchnick did a great job of promoting wrestling there forever. The audience had multiple generation of fans. They knew good wrestling when they saw it. But did we have to have St. Louis? No, we didn't. Because you got to believe that at some point in time, all that's going to come back around. When a management company that's managing these arenas see that they're losing paydays, at some point in time, that's going to trump the politics.
Yeah.
But you got to be patient and let that happen. Well, of course, the predicted gloom and doom, in the WCW office was overwhelming. So it was just a knee-jerk thing. And I think Herd being from St. Louis also added a little bit to that fuel to that fire. So, I think there's a personal issue there too, to some degree, but I think we overreacted and all that stuff. There are plenty of markets to run. And if you can just show success, look, the greatest way to get back into a building is to show the building what you've been doing business wise. And guess what? We didn't have that track record to use as a sales tool.
Let's talk about another story that Meltzer writes about here in great detail. I guess it's more of the same. What could wind up being the biggest story of the year, or wind up being a non-story, is the result of the current poker game of sorts going on between World Championship Wrestling, Titan Sports, and several municipally owned buildings and the nation's largest building management company. The story could end in a number of ways, but ultimately its final result will either solidify WCW as a minor league promotion with no hopes of being competition to the WWF, or as a loss to the WWF that in its attempts to keep WCW out of buildings will ultimately be broken. When WCW was purchased by Turner Broadcasting 2.5 years ago, it was seemingly inevitable that this battle was in the cards. But this battle can only be fought once. The timing is all important. And while it is a battle that WCW needed to eventually fight, one questions if this is the opportune time to start. This is both a market by market battle, but also in many ways a national battle, because the management of the various arenas will be looking at the initial results, and the initial results will probably cause the herd mentality, no relation to Jim, prevalent in the industry. Prevalent. I said it like Howard Stern's boy does. Prevalent in the industry. To bend to whichever side successfully exerted the most pressure in the previous battles. Exclusive access to the buildings has been a part of pro wrestling since long before the current promotional war, dating all the way back to the early 60s. The rivals of Vince McMahon Sr. had unsuccessfully attempted to book shows in Madison Square Garden. That's something I didn't know, Jim. I really thought, as a young dumbass in the wrestling business, that this sort of building war was being waged here for the first time. That Vince McMahon Jr. had perhaps started it. I had no idea that people tried to book the Garden out from under Vince Sr.
Yeah, that is. Well, here's the thing. So you just played a card there. We're playing poker. You give me a tell to book the Garden out from under Vince McMahon. I think they were just trying to get a date in the Garden to try to book it from under Vince McMahon. They weren't going to run it. These new people were they're just trying to get in the Garden because the Garden was a stamp of approval to a lot of other building people. Sure. So in other words, if one could go into the Garden and secure a date and have an event and it come off well, then it gives that promotion more grease, more juice to rent other buildings that were problematic. Like I said, the money's going to be the bottom line of it all anyway. But you got to get some success, some track record. But no, the building thing, has been that way. When people used to come into Dallas or something and try to come into Dallas, Fritz would call all his buddies, Fritz Von Erich, the owner, Booker, Starr, and call his promoter buddies like Cowboy, and would make sure that Cowboy was on board of helping Fritz defend his fort. And we did that. Bill did that with a lot of people. Bill did it himself when one of those battles of Atlanta. I remember he and I flying to Atlanta in Cowboy's plane, and they brought Bill into the Omni with an angle, in an angle. I think Ole Anderson was involved somehow. I think Ole might have been booking at that time. I'm not sure. But Cowboy had, by and large, stopped becoming a wrestler. But he was still a big enough attraction in Atlanta because we added to a 6-man tag or something and deliver. Because all as he would say, that most people are only going to run into my fist. So I'll be all right. But no, the building thing has always been an issue. And that's why so many promoters ran their buildings weekly. Because it maybe not have been the best thing for business, Conrad, as far as the gate was concerned, because you got to do something different every week. You got to book returns, you got to book long-term programs, and that wouldn't fly today because the audience is much more intelligent. And by that, I would say they know what's best for wrestling because they are on the internet and they're smart. I'm being facetious as shit right now. But nonetheless, that building thing's been ongoing, and it's always become an issue. Everybody, look, Eric can tell you stories. All your guys that are on your network can tell you stories of the same thing. It was pride. It was being paranoid of losing your foothold. So that's why they ran shows every week in a lot of territories, simply because then the opportunity for another office to come in was very challenging, because you had a deal in there with your building. There were no other wrestling events 7 days before yours or 7 days after. Well, hell, if Conrad, me and you are running weekly, we pretty well protected our ass.
Yeah.
They can't run a week before, they can't run a week after, because we're always going to be here we're going to be here every week. So the only time that became a little bit of an issue was when the local promoters started running less than weekly, every other week, every 3 weeks, whatever it may be. So I think, for example, if you had a deal in the Garden where you had a 30-day immunity, 30-day protection, and you ran every 3 weeks, it's physically impossible to get a date. If that makes any sense, right? I mean,
yeah.
So it was a lot of fun and games played in that era about how you protected your building rights. You didn't want the fans to come So God forbid you let the fans have another enjoyable experience to protect their own turf. So that's kind of where I see how that building thing always evolved, and also it was so public that a lot of promoters couldn't handle the fact they lost.
Right.
In their mind, I lost because somebody now is going to run our building, and that's not what we wanted. It sounds to me like there was some local promoters that were very insecure, and they may not have been putting forth their best work because they were the only game in town. And that's what they wanted to create, that scenario where they were the only game in town, and then move forward. So it was interesting. I think WCW, and I was there, I thought we overreacted to that whole scenario, but
let's talk about it, because back in '84, when Vince really starts to expand nationally, he does sort of break the unwritten rules, I guess, of the NWA and start going into these other towns and trying to book the buildings. But a lot of those building managers have longstanding relationships with the promoters. So as a result, the WWF would have to run the smaller sort of B building in the town. Eventually that changes, of course, and now they've pretty got run of the place. But Jim Hurd is pushing back here. Quote, if Vince can't live with the free enterprise system, that's tough. His mistake is that he might have been able to break all the regional promotions, but there's no way he can break Turner Broadcasting. It's inconceivable for him to even think he can, but he apparently doesn't understand that. And Meltzer would say, well, nobody from Titan can talk on the record to the Observer for obvious reasons. One source said, this is a war and they'd better realize that when it's over, we're going to win. Whew. It does feel like it's a big fight about nothing.
Yeah. Big egos. That's what it was about. Big egos and those that didn't understand how a quote unquote wrestling war was going to transpire. I've always found it kind of humorous. It's a wrestling war. Shit. A war for what? What are we warring about? And and it also causes people to pick sides. I've always thought that was one of the saddest developments in recent years in our business, is that people have picked sides.
Fans, you mean?
Fans, yeah.
Yeah.
Fans have been forced to take sides when our beloved business is more often maligned than not. And that, we need every break that we can, including all the fans, to support all the companies in whatever way they deem necessary, appropriate.
Right.
So it's just, I always thought that was a piece of shit decision and positioning, because it alienates fans. The fans got outsmarted. Why? It's pro wrestling, Conrad. Come on. How hard can it be if you're a pro wrestling fan? Are you really or not? Type thing. And I just felt really uncomfortable with that situation, because it creates a scenario where it divides our own audience. And we didn't have the audience, we in the business in general, didn't have the audience to let it be fragmented at our own volition. Just made no sense to me. It still doesn't.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.